All right, I need something better. I need something better. What's going to work? What's going to work?
Hi, all. We're having a little bit of a technical situation, not a big deal, but Peter is actually coming in he's in New Jersey right now, so I got to add him in. I'm waiting for him to find a situation. That looks better. All right, hold on.
How's that?
That's better. That's definitely better.
That's as good as it's going to get.
That's as good as it's going to get?
Yeah, because I guess the lighting in this is just kind of, it's
where are you, at your mom's or dad's?
Well, not my dad's. It's like a fluorescent. They've got those Thomas Edison bulbs, which I really like. So that's always a good thing. And so it's not that cold up here. It's actually, I haven't even felt the need to really have like a heavy jacket on. It's been in the 50s and 60s pretty much. So weather's already starting to change.
Which is interesting because it's kind of been cool here.
Oh, well, I guess I leave that.
Yesterday it was like highs of 60s.
Well, for Floridians, typical Floridians, you're looking at.
I mean, that's cold.
That's cold for them. They got to bundle up and whatnot. I still feel like I'm well adjusted to the not so, cold weather, or the not so warm weather, I should say. It really doesn't bother me. And being in the elements is great. And nature is just so much different up here than it is in Florida. That's for sure.
So, okay, we have our special guest, Linda Joseph, and I'm so thankful that she was able to come on. And this is somebody that I met very early on when, I think it might have been even before we announced we were running. Like it might have been just, I don't know, at a Fight for 15 protest at a rally outside of a McDonald's. And Mitchell introduced me to her. And I have just been watching this woman for the past 2.5 years, just kicking butt and taking names and just out there, she is fierce. And I just love that.
And she recognizes your tenacity to be involved for the right reasons, which is not something a lot of people do. Unfortunately, a lot of the fickleness of politics exists in South Florida, but Linda is definitely about the policy. And
she's about working people. She's about working people.
Yeah.
And that is something that is, we always say the importance of labor in going forward. And we generally tend to talk about it from the, union leadership position, like getting endorsements and what's needed and how to do it. But these are, someone like Linda is just on the ground working and fighting for people to get a living wage. It's really, she's very dedicated.
So if everybody's watching, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, share. Jen, if you can put the banner up, I don't see it.
Okay, hold on.
Get that, and I'm going to grab my phone real quick.
Look at that. There we go. All right, banner up. Yeah, I'm not used to doing this with you not here, but that's okay. And everybody, look, I am actually wearing my Florida Fight for 15 shirt that I got from going to the caravan and the rallies. But so I'm all in it today.
Yes,
it is uplifting labor, but we could do some news.
Yeah, so we do have a lot, and obviously we have a lot to talk about until Florida Guy obviously brings up a good point, which is we did win the battle for the $15 minimum wage in Florida. Unfortunately, the Florida GOP, it just got lots and lots of wonderful things coming their way, and needless to say, they've done everything they could to stop working people from having a higher wage. But hey, I wish I could say that that's the worst thing that they're trying to do right now. It's not the least of the problems. But as you know, we put out a message on social media basically acknowledging the fact that, Governor DeSantis has been involved in essentially pay to play. And there's a lot of definitive evidence that suggests that. There's no way they would have done a special, a full segment on 60 Minutes unless there was some teeth to this. And obviously DeSantis has been getting himself knee deep in a lot of different, you want to call them scandals. Bottom line, he's definitely somebody who is a mini Trump in every sense of the word. He basically does whatever he wants. He thinks it's just going to roll off his back. He's going to be Teflon.
And he might, and it might. We don't know. The jury's still out on that. I don't know. We'll see when he's up for re-election.
If he does win re-election for governor, and at this point we still think he will unless this really starts to come down against him. But if he does win re-election for governor, he is going to run for president. And he is the type of person that the Republican Party would love to get behind because he can carry the Trump wing of the party along with the old guard GOP. And he's in a very important state for the GOP. So this is very contentious. And unfortunately, on the one hand, he's not wrong when we talk about, and again, this is focusing on Florida, the importance of recognizing that getting the vaccine is essential, but basically branding yourself and making so that you can't go public places without essentially showing your papers, that is a problem. And not everybody is going to agree on that. But again, as I always like to point out, I can still remember being a sophomore in college and listening to people in the classroom talk about how we have to give up habeas corpus because we have to bring freedom to these other countries in the Middle East. And all I could think is, this is crazy. You really, how far are you willing to go to get something done, and at what cost? And it seems to me that the cost of what a lot of people are willing to give up in order to feel safe about COVID is very, very dangerous. And then, of course, you get somebody like DeSantis, who is essentially a full-blown libertarian, if you think about it, and he comes out and he makes a statement about, I am going to, not about people shouldn't be required to get the vaccine passport. It's, I'm going to sign an executive order saying that you can't enforce it no matter what. Now, a lot of the independents and civil libertarians and even the GOP that are loyal to him, they think this is the greatest thing in the world.
I'm not, I like it. So.
But it's not. But again, from a political standpoint, it's not good to give any type of cannon fodder to somebody like DeSantis, because then he goes and does what he does, which is makes backroom pay-to-play deals with the public's family to basically control where the vaccines go, and is profiting off of it at the same time. But as I think we pointed out on the last podcast, there's already been a government contract, I want to say for Pfizer, that was getting $4 billion for their vaccine. So there's always going to be this profit-sharing component that, as long as we don't have a universal healthcare system, is going to become a monumental problem. And it's just going to surface more and more. It just so happens that in Florida, we like to do everything out in the open. Our corruption is very transparent in Florida.
So that's basically what we're saying is, on the one hand, he was giving all the rich people the vaccines, and on the other hand, he bans the idea of vaccine passports. So so that's, for me, he's batting 500 there. Okay, so there we go.
And that's not, unfortunately, if the Democrats are trying to win the governorship in Florida in 2022, you have to understand that you're not going to be able to rely on a scandal to get up to date with where DeSantis is right now, because he is very popular. People are in total denial about, there was a poll that came out recently that suggested that Nikki Fried was basically tied with DeSantis. And again, you have to remember that polling is nothing like it used to be. A lot of people are very skeptical of polling. They sometimes give false answers. There's a lot of things to consider. And when you're the incumbent, and especially when you're the incumbent of an incumbent party, you like to say it all the time that Florida really is a red state. Yes, once in a great while, they are able to win a presidential race in the state of Florida by winning the electoral votes. But in terms of state government, this is a red state. I mean, you'd be kidding yourself to suggest otherwise. So the idea that DeSantis is going to fall, even with this scandal, it's a very big stretch. But I do think that the more things start to mount, like with Cuomo in New York, where people just are not letting up with everything that's going on, I do think in the long run it's going to be difficult for him to continue to sidestep all these landmines.
I think it's going to depend on who the Democrats stick up anyway. But the bigger issue, though, is this nightmare that's going on in Piney Point.
And so you're going to have to speak a little bit more to this. I don't know of this specific area, but my understanding is that this is millions and millions of toxic wastewater.
Yeah, more than 300 homes have been near Tampa Bay have been evacuated, and a highway near the Piney Point Reservoir has been closed. You know, like if I was better at doing tech, I would like pull up a map, but I'm not. So this is on the Gulf Coast of Florida. This is on the south part, like south of Tampa Bay on the Gulf Coast is where this is. So this is something that it's a wastewater tank and millions of toxic water. So they're fearing a leak. Basically, the infrastructure is about to crumble. And when it crumbles, there is going to be this onrush of toxic water all around the Tampa Bay area. So they now are starting to evacuate homes. And it's been Florida has declared a state of emergency here.
Well, this is not just a state of emergency. This is a reflection of just how poorly we deal with the massive pollution problem that we have. And it's just going to affect so many different things. And when you consider, you know, what the real estate market is like in Pinellas and Hillsborough County, I mean, you're talking billions upon billions of dollars in damage and long-term effects that this is going to have. And all because we have a horrific, filtration system in the state. We know the problems that we've had, especially in that particular area when it comes to, you know, the blue-green algae, you know, the red tide. This is just one more thing to add to the list of why this is a state that needs to be run in a very efficient manner from a green energy perspective. And there's no reason for it not to be. And this is just yet another example of how, you know, when you think about the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers gives our country a D+ rating when it comes to infrastructure.
I think we might be up to a C or a C-.
Where does Florida fall?
Oh,
in that spectrum? That's what I'd like to know. Florida is the third most populous state in the country.
Okay, so here's the deal with this Piney Point. Piney Point, this is what it is, right? So it's a reservoir in Manatee County, so it's about 40 miles south of Tampa. Okay. And it holds wastewater, millions of gallons of wastewater, and it's on the brink of collapse. And so it's immensely, at least 316 people have been told to evacuate. 79-acre reservoir could burst despite their efforts at this point to plug it. And then there's a reason why it's so toxic. That's the other issue. So although phosphate forms part of a healthy diet, excess amounts of the chemical in the body have been linked to kidney disease and cell stress. So this is what's going to happen when this is going to be in our food source. Like this is not this. It's okay. So the wastewater is from a former phosphate plant. That's what this is. So now this is going to leak and be part of the Tampa Bay area water.
And that's not surprising in the least. And again, as we've talked about, you know, we must, as much as anything, and this is the scary part about what goes on at the state capitol. For those of you who know about the way politics works in Florida, the GOP in this state is very, very regressive. That is the nicest way that I can say it.
Yeah.
And so where we are allocating our tax dollars, and look, for those who may not know, you know, Governor DeSantis was actually pretty good on the environment up until COVID. He did do some good things with the Everglades, and he was definitely moving the needle in the right direction away from Rick Scott's work, which, let's face it, that's not hard to do. The bar. Again,
we have a very low bar here.
Very low bar. But this is where we get to the point where, because Florida is such a regressive state, and definitely one of the most regressive in the country, and the one of the most consequence because of how many people live here and the impact that the state has because of, you know, it's such a melting pot of all different ways of life. People from all over the country and frankly the world end up living here. The reason that this is such a contentious point is because we do not have a federal government that is doing anything in their capacity to really step in and get through this regressive, you know, legislated state. We did pass a $15 minimum wage. The Florida GOP doesn't want to do anything about it. We also have the PRO Act that they're trying to get through because Florida is a right to work state, and the GOP, as long as they control it, is never going to change that law. So we need to get it done at the federal level. And then obviously the final component is infrastructure. And if they ever manage to get an infrastructure bill through, who knows what it's going to look like? And little by little, they just keep cutting it down, cutting it down, cutting it down, cutting it down. So ultimately, where are we going to get any type of relief from? And so when a story like this hits, and we find out that, once again, our infrastructure in this state is horrifically bad, it is not surprising, but it is devastating.
So this is the imminent catastrophe in Florida right now. That was big story.
And then there'll be another one tomorrow. So, that's also the problem with living here. Oh, Jimmy, please, we'll talk about you on Thursday night. We're not dealing with it. We are not talking.
No way.
We are not talking about AOC until Thursday.
Okay, so do you see my fourth story that I found? Do you see this?
Yeah, I am not. I'm not that surprised because only a Florida man would do something like that.
This is, we had talked about having hashtag because Florida. Yes. As soon as I saw this story, I'm like, hashtag because Florida. So this amuses me, and I know it shouldn't, but just the way that the headline just cracked me up. So I actually read this story, and the guy was in the back of the police car. The police car pulls over to help a stranded motorist, and the guy somehow gets out from the back, gets into the front, his hands still cuffed behind his back, mind you, and drives off.
And of course, he had to be from Florida. There was no other possible place he'd be coming from.
And since we're doing Focus on Florida, I had to put, because it's just so amusing to me.
Yeah, but it's just
and this did not end in some horrid tragedy either. It wouldn't be as entertaining.
No, but then again, we've always heard of Florida man, and that's just, unfortunately, with our Focus on Florida every week, there's always going to be at least one of these stories.
Right. And you know what? We should almost exclusively have that. But, this week we didn't really talk about having like our Florida, reptile / bootlicker. But there is always a because Florida story. Like there is no shortage of it.
And sometimes we're not always going to have some, floating person in the bay. Although if there was a person directly responsible for what just happened in Tampa, and Lord knows there may be, eventually there's going to be a serious investigation as to what's going on. But of course, there is a lot of work that we do need to do. And I'm still of the mind that the only way we're ever going to evolve politically and really move in the direction that we need to move in is we really need to focus on nonpartisan labor-related projects. Yeah. And that can be a multitude of different things. We don't need to just be looking at this red team versus blue team. Although I would encourage anybody who wants to be able to have a direct impact on democracy to always look to become a precinct committee captain, always look to any organization that is non-corporate funded to get more involved. Like I'm the treasurer for the Broward County Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party. It is what it is. In the state of Florida, as we point out constantly, we're gerrymandered to the hilt and we have closed voting. So you've only got two choices. You're either in the red or the blue. But that doesn't mean that we can't find ways to come together. And so one of the things that I was thinking about, obviously infrastructure is a good one. But as we've done before on the show, Whole Washington is obviously, they have their movement up in Washington State, and they're doing a very good job of pushing single-payer health care at the state level. I think we need to be doing that in Florida. Statistics show that the overwhelming majority of people now support a single-payer healthcare system. So if we were to push single-payer in Tallahassee, and according to one of our friends who works with one of our state senators, there is no real movement for single-payer healthcare in terms of there being an organization that directly focuses on something like that. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the type of thing that we could be doing at the grassroots level that could be making a real impact. And going forward, we have to think of these ways that are not going to just be about Republicans bad, Democrats good, and vice versa.
Okay. So I was just looking into something that Mo had called me about and told me about, and this is going to be something that...
Who's Mo, for those who don't know?
Oh, Mona Lisa, my friend. About a friend of hers or someone that she knows son was the 15-year-old that shot the real estate agent back in March and killed him. It was an armed robbery. And so this is somebody who he just turned 15. They're trying him as an adult. But the more important story is they're talking about his record, but they're not talking about the record of his mom begging for help his entire life and saying he needs help. He's like, from my understanding, is partially, he might be on this spectrum, but he has other issues. And many times she was begging for help and to get services and was told she was going to get bed, but then that didn't happen and all of this stuff. And she's been fighting for years to get him help. Yeah. And the juvenile detention system completely failed them. And so this is a bigger story than just what happened. And so more information on that to come, but there will be a press conference about this on his next court date.
It's really unfortunate that people do not or even want to acknowledge how bad things really are. And we are a divided country in many ways. We're divided amongst those that have and those that have not. And it's really that simple. The only problem is the have-nots are a lot bigger than the haves these days. And the media does a really good job of covering that up and not showing you the real side of the way things are. I was reading recently that apparently one of the things that was going on, like there's a big scandal apparently going on with Trump. What else is new? That they had like an organization that was getting people to donate to their cause. But what they were doing is something that a lot of scam artists like to do. They will tell you that you're only donating one time. But what ends up happening is they get you locked in and you're donating month to month. The only problem is in a couple of instances, they've been wiping out people's bank accounts. And if that happens, who are people going to go and complain to? Yeah, they'll complain and they'll talk about it in the media for a little while, but then it just goes away. It doesn't stick. And so we're kind of at the mercy of trying to fight back against, as you like to say, this corporate monolith that is very powerful and is very resourceful. As much as people may be looking at other options as far as where to get their news from, they feel like something's wrong and they can't really trust the system in terms of what's going on right now. It's just so hard to drag them away. And so somebody actually messaged on the channel, was watching one of the videos on modern monetary theory with Steve Grumbine. Oh. And what they said was, we really need to have a quick hitting way of identifying this issue so people really understand a basic, version of what this type of economics is all about. Much like Medicare for All, much like UBI. If you could keep it simple, stupid, as they say, then I think a lot of people would get it. Now, I don't know.
I think it's extremely hard for certain people to grasp. And the reason it's hard to grasp is because it's very amorphous.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's and people like tangible. So most of the people, I think this is the thing about, like, we're gold standard minded people. And it is very, very difficult to wrap our minds. I mean, I'm speaking for me. That there are just certain concepts.
Even though we've been off the gold standard for almost 50 years.
No, I know that. I know that in theory. But what I'm saying is, in terms of being able to wrap our minds around how that works, we're people that are like, we can understand the gold standard, but it's just so, it's just not that. And so I think it is hard. I don't think, it's theoretical. It's not tangible to people. So I think it is hard to understand.
Yeah, and again, when we get distracted, when all this infighting is going on, Linda's going to come on in a few minutes. And like I said, we'll discuss, what happened with AOC at greater length on Thursday. She has made, we both agree, some good decisions lately. She's made some questionable decisions lately.
Are we talking about this study that came out that she was like the least effective or very ineffective congressperson based on policy and legislation passed?
Yeah, and I think that that's a two-way street because, on the one hand, she may not have the best team around her and people can make whatever argument or assessment they want on that particular fact. But there's also the problem with her kind of being a mini Pelosi from the standpoint of she actively seeks the spotlight. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people are turned off by that. And, you also have the problem that happened with when Wasserman Schultz was in charge of the DNC, she constantly sought the spotlight. And a lot of people really don't like that kind of stuff. Now, with Trump, his ability was a little different because he was a wild card and he was willing to go after everybody in his own party and the other party. And people really ate that stuff up, and it became a cottage industry. Because when you think about it, he made billions upon billions of dollars for a lot of different people across many different spectrums while he was in power. These other individuals do not do that, and they tend to be on very specific dividing lines. So when things like that end up happening, while I do think that Alex is fighting for the cause, and I still maintain that she's a good person who really wants to get us where we need to go, no one is perfect, and people are going to make questionable decisions. All I can say is that, one of the big stories, of course, recently is that she's been donating an excessive amount of money to corporate Democrats in swing districts. So I would not have an issue with that on two fronts.
That are being challenged by progressives? Are they being challenged?
This is just strictly, my assumption is that.
Don't make assumptions. You know what happens.
No, my understanding is that this is strictly about whether or not they're going up against the GOP and they want to keep the House in 2 years. Okay, that's one. All right, that's fine. But the other thing you also have to consider is Alex has really backed off of supporting primary challengers. And it was only brought to my attention today, and I didn't even realize this, but your friend and slate mate, Eva Podstova, did not get AOC's endorsement, and that's one thing. But apparently, AOC was donating to Eva's, opponent, who's incumbent Tom McLaughlin, who. Then
she was donating money against progressive challengers.
And I don't know how many instances that actually happened in. I would listen. That's terrible to begin with.
Well, you know what? I sit on that advisory board for Eva's Catching Fire organization,
correct.
And so I communicate with her frequently, and I will find out more about that because that is very problematic.
And so for people
I generally reserve judgment on her, but that is very problematic to me.
Yeah, and again, I totally understand if Alex's intention is to make sure that she's buying, you could call it whatever you want, buying influence with potential moderate elected representatives to get progressive policy passed. And if that is the plan, then that's fine. I can understand that. But if you're actively working against non-corporate progressive challengers, that's a problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's not playing. You don't need to play that game. No. That's crossing too far and to the other side. And I'm going to have to get more information on that.
And people already have a hard enough time even trusting the system. That's a very big part of the problem. So when people are already questioning whether this is even worth doing, and then Alex starts doing what she's doing, it makes people question whether electoral politics is even worth it.
It's a lot of people are feeling very discouraged about that right now.
And she does. And look, as somebody who seeks the spotlight, she kind of is obligated to address this situation. I like I said. Oh, and farming ganja, absolutely correct. Charles Barkley, who has been contemplating running for governor of Alabama for a very long time, and I would love to see him do that. He had an excellent take the other day, which is we are divide and conquered along racial lines because we're really aligned on economic lines. And that is something that the establishment doesn't want.
No, so that ends everything because that ends their money plan. That's the whole thing. That we can't, then the jig is up.
And that's why it's right, and rightfully so, that people even on the supposed progressive left who do social media, and they do it in incendiary ways. They attack other content creators. They're trying to do clout and get views and always get subscribers and, obviously, financial contributors. And I don't fault anybody for doing what they have to do to make a living. But if what you're doing is actually hurting the cause and is actually being regressive toward—
Are you talking in terms of what people have to do to make a living in reference to AOC having to make a living as
I'm only using it as
because there's a lot of ways to make a living, and that one is, No,
that's fair. And again, Alex is on a completely different playing field because she's got tens of millions of supporters, and of course she's one of the most recognizable elected officials in the country and frankly in the world. And when you have that type of a platform, there's so much more that you could be doing. But before Linda comes on, I think it just kind of reaffirms what you and I have discussed at length. Nina Turner needs to get into Congress.
Oh, yeah.
And if Nina gets in, I really think it will take a lot of pressure off of Alex to constantly be the one who gets the focus of the attention from the corporate media.
Wait. We have a question though. Hold on. Peter is not sick here. Peter is not sick. He's visiting his. No, I told you it's very gray. Lighting is everything, but he's in this, not our studio. He is in New Jersey visiting his family. So no, he doesn't look sick, but I think they just thought maybe you were at home because you were had the virus or something.
Well, I could act like I'm really sick.
No, he's not sick. But he does. You look great. I mean, look at our screen color difference. Do you not see it?
Yeah, you have great lighting in your studio, and I'm in a kitchen. So I'm doing the best I can with what I've been presented with. There's not much I can do. I'm just glad that I was able to smartly.
You need the selfie ring.
No, but actually you'd be proud. And I know you're always criticizing me for whether or not I'm being punctual enough. So I decided to check and make sure that the StreamYard actually worked on my Mac over an hour ago. And as it turns out, it wasn't up to code. And I had to go through a whole bunch of updates in order to make sure that this was going to work, because if not, I was going to have to do this off my cell phone.
I was actually going to text you and say, please be professional and don't do this pacing your house on the cell phone. And then I said, no, he'll get it together. He'll figure it out. He'll be serious. So, but I do think though, for traveling, you need one of those little light rings that you put on the laptop.
Well, that definitely helps. And you know what? I think there is one in this house. So, no,
you don't need to go get it. But I do think that would solve your issue, because otherwise it looks fine.
Yeah. And again, I would just tell everybody, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The truth of the matter is, as long as somebody like Alex continues to see, everyone says, oh, they just tweet. Well, okay, let's just say that they just tweet. Let's do the, the shoe is completely dropped and, the glass is half empty approach. Everything is always never enough, never enough, never enough. The way I see it, one of the things that makes politics successful, especially when it comes to policy, is reaffirmation of something that gets repeated over and over and over again. So if at the end of the day, the goal is to get to Medicare for all, to get to some form of a Green New Deal with a green energy infrastructure bill, whether it is to get to a living wage, whether it is to get to ending the wars, and whether, of course, it is to get to real criminal justice reform. If we're going to do that, having representatives at the federal level who have massive followings who constantly repeat those talking points is what is going to allow us to get where we need to go. If somebody like Joe Crowley was still elected as a congressional representative, not only would he be swimming in corporate money, but he would be defending Governor Cuomo. So think about that.
Well, and I think also what you're saying is like what I've said all along, when people look at a campaign when the person doesn't win and they see it as a loss. And yes, you didn't win that seat, but the campaign built momentum, got people, got followers, brought attention. Like, it's all part of this big, it's like a snowball effect. And so every campaign that has any contribution in terms of outreach and education, and in our case, service, that's contributing to progress. So it's not just about getting a person in a seat. And I think that's the whole premise of what we're trying to do, is that this is not about politics, it's about service. And so, I don't think it's a waste. And I think everybody contributes in different ways. I think everybody likes to hate everybody. So I haven't been on social media since Friday.
That's a good point.
Yes. And I've actually decided that, and this has been really good. So every time I even feel the desire to look, I actually uninstalled Facebook from my phone. So I have no just easy access. And every time that I even feel tempted to check it, I read. And I go into a book that I'm in and I read. And so I've been distracting myself. And I think at some point I'm going to get to where I don't even care. Like, I'm not even interested. And that's where I'm kind of hoping to be. But so I haven't been there since Friday, and it's been kind of nice.
Well, read The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. I can lend you that. Read Andrew Yang's book. Really good.
I have my own books, and you and I do not agree on reading materials. I have my own books. I have several things that I have lined up.
And then, of course, the book that I'm reading right now, which I would recommend to all of you guys, if you want to get into the mind of where the, I wouldn't even say neoliberal establishment, but just getting into the mind of where the very financially comfortable moderate sits. I'm reading Leadership in Turbulent Times by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and I think it's a very good book.
Yeah, I'm reading Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. I'm almost
and we got to get her on the show.
Well, I can't, look, I'd almost be kind of giddy if she even responded to me, but you never know. I could get lucky.
Yeah, well, we've been pretty good at, getting people on the show. And
I think it's because people know that I really like them and just think they have a really good message. Like it's nothing like there's no other motive other than I really like this person. I want to talk to them. So any kind of reason. But so Linda Joseph is on. She's here. She's always out working and doing her thing. I know she was at a class, so we're going to be nosy and find out about that. And also, I think she and I might be wearing matching shirts. So here we go.
That'd be great. Yes, you are. All right, so I'm the odd man out. I look like a fool. I don't actually fight for 15. I'm secretly on the GOP side.
He's out of town and not at access to all of his
hair. My mess with me, Linda. You don't know. I can actually. I totally told them not to pass the $15 minimum wage, and they were listening to me. We passed it at the state level, but at the fed, no. You totally have to work for slave wage. I live like this. I was going to live like this.
So, Linda, just give everybody a little bit of a background, because to be honest, I don't even know what your title is or like what your position is with union. I really don't. To me, I think of you as the queen of the fight for 15.
Well, 12 years ago, we had some fast food workers who walked off on the job and said no more. And 12 years ago, if you said $15 an hour, people would just laugh, just literally laugh. Even people who we were fighting for thought it was impossible. But now it's normal. Now it's become normalized. It's become, you have companies who want to be applauded because they're paying out $15, which we still know it's still not enough. But at least we have normalized the language, and that's saying that, a living wage matters, and people work hard for what they do, and we need to start paying them for their value and stop having people work for slave wages. What I do, I have the best and the wonderful privilege of representing the most marginalized, the most hardest working people in our community. And now we even got a new title for them. We call them essential workers. We just don't pay them like essential workers.
Right.
That's their new title.
So it's almost like as long as we're nice and give them a good title, we don't actually have to pay them. But are you an owner of a franchise? Or you own like a restaurant? Like, what is your connection in fast food industry? Like, I'm an
organizer. So SEIU, 12 years ago, decided, that's one of the fight we wanted to fight. Let's make living wage a part of the conversation. Enough with poor wages, enough, fighting poverty. So they did it 12 years ago. And so, like I tell you, well, now it's normal. It is so, we have done such a great job in really putting the workers and letting the workers tell the story. It has nothing to do with the union. It's about workers organizing and understanding their power and making their power become truth. So it's a work-led organizing, but the union will support it. And that's how we've been doing it. I mean, we've had workers go all the way up to the White House to introduce Barack Obama. You have Joe Biden talk about $15 minimum wage. My guy, Bernie Sanders has been talking about $15 minimum wage 5-10 years ago, when it was when it was really a living wage. Now we know it's not a living wage. So now we have normalized the language. And that's that's who I work for. I work for SEIU, but but it's a worker-based led organization.
Right. You guys are just sort of there to help guide them. Exactly. And they're coming from their own place of where they are. And I wanted to ask you, I know like a couple of different times that we've been, a lot of these are obviously at McDonald's restaurants. That's a big problem. What is it like the distinction between the people that are working in there and how easy or hard is it to get them to walk off? How easy or hard is it to get the people that are the actual workers to cross their employer? Because I would think a lot of people are very scared.
What McDonald's will never appreciate their workers. Their workers are the most loyal, the most really afraid and do not want to walk off. And they're loyal and they like what they do and they're very proud of what they do. And as bad as it could be for them, it's really hard for them to talk bad about McDonald's, even walk off the job. And knowing they can get fired any day, they have no contract, they have no worker, they have no worker union, they have no guarantee to work. And that is the hardest thing, to convince them to join the union, and you have some union protection. It's because they're loyal and they're hard workers, because truly they just do the work.
Yeah. So what percentage of them, like, do you think down here are part of the union?
Well, Florida is not a big union state, and that's what we're
We
trying
know.
to change. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to change. For the last, I'll say for the last 15, 20 years, the GOP, the Republican Party, really tried to destroy the union and what the union was all about.
Yep.
But see, the one thing about the American spirit, when you try to take something away, then that's when it'll grow. So because they try to take the union away, you start seeing the growth of the union, just not in the South. So it's one thing, we have to educate them about the union, what the union stand for, and how the union is a protection. And the union is not us, it's them. And once that education is done and they can understand and grasp it, then you start seeing them bringing other people. Because you got families like 2-3 generation that's been in the fast food industry.
Yeah.
Linda, what would you say is, for those who are watching, this may be Trump country, but Florida did pass a $15 minimum wage, yet it seems like Tallahassee doesn't want to give what the people voted for. So what is the biggest obstacle that we're facing right now as far as that goes?
First of all, we're not Trump country. This is, let me tell you, we've been so gerrymandered, right?
Oh.
But listen, we've had, this state has passed, when we push politicians aside and do the true will of the people, it's always progressive values.
Yes.
If you notice that. Listen, minimum wage, Amendment 2, that's what we call the minimum wage. It won more votes than anyone, more than Trump, more than Biden, more than anyone. It won overwhelmingly. And they made it so hard. They made it so hard to get it on the ballot. And every time we got it, they moved the goalposts and moved the goalposts, kept moving it, But we still persevere. We still got it on. We got it on the ballot and we won it. And it's not all the winner take it all. You have to win 60% of the vote. Imagine that.
Yeah.
60% of the vote. And we won on the first round.
Yeah. No,
So
the
that
60%.
We want this.
The 60% thing was a response to when it was just 51% or 50 point, whatever, when it was majority rule. And then the Republican legislature started realizing, wait a minute, and the populists are rising up and doing it on their own. So then they changed it to 60.
Absolutely.
And then when the Amendment 4 passed with the returning citizen, the right to vote restored, then they wanted to try to raise it up to 65 again. Like they want to keep pushing it because they don't want to do what the will of the people is what we want them to do.
Yeah, but nevertheless, don't worry. There's always a sneaky Republican somewhere who try to take the will of the people away. We have a state senator out of Tampa, St. Petersburg, really out of St. Petersburg. He
what
tried
was
to take it away.
Yeah, what was his name? Brandis? Jeff Brandis? Is that the guy?
Jeff Brandis.
That's
the one.
Yeah.
Listen, and this is how he labeled hard to hire. What does that exactly mean, hard to hire?
Step on the poor's throat.
They deserve $15 an hour. He didn't believe anybody who was under 21 deserved $15 an hour. He didn't believe returning citizen, who's the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, the one who needs to start more than anyone, who's just really rebuilding their lives. And we don't want recidiration. We do not want them to go back. So pay them a living wage. And these are the people. He wants to not pay him the $15. He wants a permanent second-class citizen. Who does that?
Somebody on the payroll of corporations and people that don't want to pay their employees and want to. But what's so frustrating is that he presents this, and people like that. What they'll do is they twist it and present it like they're helping those people, because if those people have to get paid a $15 minimum wage, then they won't be able to get the work, and we really need to help them get work. And that's how they try to sell it. And so, it's really quite gross.
Well, it's definitely, and it's
Jim Crow at its finest. It's just a permanent second-class citizen. Who can make that kind of money? It's not even, first of all, if we ever kept with inflations, the minimum wage right now be 25, 26, economists said, like in the 20s.
Yes.
And so nevertheless, the $15 is not even, it's gradually. You don't even get the benefit of the 15 to 2026.
I know.
In New Zealand, they just upped their minimum wage to $20 an hour. How is New Zealand ever able to? New Zealand is not even on the radar screen when it comes to countries with a high GDP, and they can pay their citizens $20 an hour. we can't pay ours above $7.25 an hour. Guys, at some point, you have to recognize that the game is rigged and this is a class war and we're all in this together. You got to stop looking for reasons to be divided and we got to come together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is something that we talk about all the time. I mean, unfortunately, politics down here is very partisan and it's very often ugly. And I find it very counterproductive. And so one of the things that it's like, I go everything issue by issue, right? Like, these are my issues. This is what I believe in. And if I don't care what color if you're blue or red, if you care about this issue, then we're on the same team on this issue. And I just think that the partisanness is really a problem. Labor is the issue. And I don't think that labor and any sort of like viability of having a labor movement can happen unless the labor from the left, meaning like the more liberal minded, forward thinking, and then you do have labor that are more conservative, whether socially conservative, whatever it is. And we need to all come together and recognize that this is a labor issue.
Yes.
It is all a labor issue. And then that's why it Amendment 2 won overwhelming. It crossed all kind of party line, all kind of, ethnic ground. People just recognize that we're not being valued for our work. And so, I had this soldier who said to me, why should we pay fast food workers $15? I don't make $15. I said, why don't you?
Exactly.
This is not a race to the bottom. It's a race to the top.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. A lot of people feel like the people that are in like technical work, like different kinds of work that don't necessarily make great money, but they went to some sort of schooling or they made whatever it is. And they have well, that's not fair. I got me this and now you have to it's same as old people that have Medicare that don't care if other people get Medicare because they have Medicare. It's like, you think of this as a pie. They have us thinking that this is a pie and that if someone else gets a bigger slice, that means your slice is smaller. And that's just not how this works.
It doesn't. All ties rise up. If we start paying the lowest our workers, the low wages workers, everything has to rise. What happens that will there be casualty of war? Yes, but will they have more prosperity, more people? The thing about working class citizen and the working poor is that they spend. They don't have Swiss bank account to hide the money. They will spend and they will put back in the economy because this is what they do. But if you keep keeping the wages down, keep poor wages, we never rise. Nothing gets better. It's just the same thing over and over again.
And they keep squeezing people so tight to the point in which I don't know how much longer they think people are just going to sit idly by. The dividing lines have always been rather, treacherous to say the least. But I also think that the labor movement has, again, it's been dying a slow death since, Reagan fired the air traffic controllers 40 years ago.
Yep.
And even as people have attempted to hang on over that time, Fred Frost, great friend and, a great union fighter, just talks all the time about how, we just keep sinking. And I'm thinking, the future to any type of success really is through a nonpartisan labor movement. And I think if we focus on that going forward and electoral politics absolutely matters, and you definitely, unfortunately, are stuck with two choices in the state of Florida. So you have to be on the side, whichever side is going to fight for labor. Now, the Democrats may not fight very hard, but they're going to fight certainly to a degree that's more favorable to workers than the GOP ever will, because this is a right-to-work state, and it's one of the worst in the country. If you could talk about the value of, because again, when it comes to federal politics, it really matters when it's actual labor-related policy that can be passed that can supersede the type of regressive policies we have here in Florida. If you could talk about what the importance of the PRO Act would mean to the state of Florida, which would essentially override the right-to-work laws, that would be great.
No, listen, let me tell you something. If we start, it's the right to work laws that's been killing the labor union. But I'm telling you, there's something happening. There's an undercurrent that's happening that people from Alabama, Ruby Red, Alabama, who's trying to organize one of the biggest companies, Amazon. So something is happening to the labor union. I'm telling you, it is coming back and it's going to roar back. If we can get that right to work state out of our politics and also out of the union, you will see the rise of the union. And I'm telling you, there is something happening. They're trying to quell it, but it's happening. slowly. If we take over this, if we let the people in Alabama organize Amazon, game over.
I agree.
Over.
It's going to spread like wildfire. And I already think it is, because everyone knows the regressive tactics that they've been employing. We all know what the Waltons have done for years with Walmart and how they've crushed small businesses. And, that's one of the things that I've always said, progressives and libertarians share a lot of common interests. And, they have to find ways to come together, especially because we advocate so strongly for small businesses and entrepreneurship. The major corporate special interest is what divides us. And it's what forces us into these very difficult decisions about, how do we spend our money properly? Well, we don't have a lot of money to spend, so we have to look for what is the least expensive. And then the least expensive ends up being, the corporations that are trying to make sure that we don't get a living wage.
Correct.
We don't have the right to form a union. So It's this endless cycle where we keep on repeating the same thing over and over again. And I'm just wondering, how do we become more of a cohesive unit? Because that is one of the hardest things that I have discovered, especially in South Florida politics. People are very fickle, and movements tend to sputter out of control before they even really have a chance to grow. But what I do agree with, and this is, again, like I said, when it comes to the inside-outside strategy, anytime we can get to an issue that most people will agree on, our minimum wage is way too low, so we got to get that up.
Correct.
We should have universal health care.
Absolutely.
We do not need for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. If you saw what's going on right now in Tampa with this dam that's breaking, you can only imagine what a green energy jobs focused infrastructure plan would do for our state. I think most people generally agree on this stuff. It's when it becomes hyper partisan that's when we become divided.
Absolutely. And they want to keep it hyper partisan. But the truth is, like I told you, we won 61% of the vote on the last election. So we have more in common than we have not in common. People want to enjoy a union. People want to enjoy knowing that they have a union to support them and support their voice. They want to sit at the table. They do. They just make it so hard. Just so people could even have a living wage. And that's the secret that they use for years. And I'm telling you, if Amazon does it and it looked like it's looking really good, that is game over, because they're the number one employer. And then second is McDonald's. And we've been relentlessly showing McDonald's up. Last year, McDonald's wanted us to give them a prize because they said they're going to stop lobbying against a $15 minimum wage. So we should give them a prize so they could stop screwing, their employees over.
Yeah, no, it's like a very low bar that we have set with how we treat our workers here. And I think that the Amazon is going to be a trickle. I was going to ask if you knew what the status was there, like what's going on there right now. I know they started tallying votes, but I don't know how long that process is and what that takes.
Listen, Amazon had not made it easy. They really, if not crossed the line, but really got close to really violating all kinds of labor laws. But listen, last time I heard is that the union and the workers are holding strong. So we won't know until another couple of more days. But I'm telling you, if that happens, and I understand. And the thing is that's so infuriating is that you have other countries that Amazon is, and they enjoy a union. They have a union. They have union representation, but it's just here in the United States.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, there's countries like in Scandinavia where they don't have a minimum wage, but they have extremely strong unions. And so their pay is very, very high. So they don't need a minimum wage. And so we can't get either. Like we can't get unions or a decent minimum wage.
Listen to this one, Jen. There is a Amazon in France, and they have a union. And when the pandemic started, we had people going to work, and they was like only essential items, right? And the France union's like, no, these are not essential item. A video game, a board game, no, they shut operation down. But guess who picked it up? The good old USA. And we sent people in the warehouse, in the closed space, in the middle of a pandemic, and they went to work.
Yeah, we're seeing all sorts of stuff from that. Our friend Jordan Cheriton, who's a journalist, has spent a lot of time covering. He was the first person to have Chris Smalls on his show back when this all started, and he got fired for basically like whistleblowing on Amazon's COVID practices very early on. But I wanted to ask you, so what's the next big campaign Now that technically Florida has the fight for 15, I mean, we actually got the fight for 15. So what's the next move?
We're gonna listen. Nothing is ever good unless we have everyone to enjoy it. Yes, we have it in Florida, and I told you it's on a ladder. Laterally. We don't really fully enjoy it to 2026. But what we're really pushing for is a national. We're pushing for a federal minimum wage. So everyone in the country could at least deserve it. Like we're talking about $30,000 a year. That should be the floor, not the ceiling.
Yes.
We almost got it on the last bill. Biden really tried to put it in. And hopefully, he said that he's going to introduce it. And hopefully, we got some good Democrats with some good spine and really push it this time because people deserve it.
When you talk about spine, that's a great segue. We are tremendous supporters of Nina Turner and really would love to see her get to Congress. I think having a fighter like that with that type of charisma, but also that type of fire, I think would really make a huge difference. I think a lot of the non-corporate representatives that are in elected office right now are doing a good job, but there's kind of got to be like sort of that leader that just says, yeah, we're kicking butts and taking names. And I really think somebody like Nina is that fighter that would be able to really cultivate the movement in a way that it kind of hasn't been that way for a couple of years now. But it could easily pick back up again if the right person has got the megaphone.
I think in the House we're good. It's just the Senate side. If we could whip that Senate back to a place and really get some senators with some spine, I think we could really put some really progressive value. And the $15 minimum wage passed in the House 2 years ago. Two years ago when Pelosi took over. It's that Senate that we need to take over. And if we can get the Senate, because it's just not right. How can we have a $15 minimum wage here in Florida, New York, and other places, and not other places? Everything is it's just incredible. I don't know the logic of the way everyone thinks.
Well, I do think that the infrastructure that's in place, and obviously, as you know, probably one of the best, if not the best union state overall in the country is Nevada. And what they were just able to do with the non-corporate Democrats taking over the state party, I think that in many ways is the blueprint, because even if it is the Democratic Party, use whatever apparatus is at your disposal. But as long as the infrastructure is built on grassroots and not corporate, I do think that is something that could really take shape in a lot of different places. And then ultimately, that's when you're able to pick off some of these Senate seats that really need to be flipped at this point, whether it is GOP or corporate Dem. Either way, I think that if you really build a solid infrastructure through, the state party apparatus and obviously through labor, that's when you're going to be able to knock off some of these heavily entrenched senators, which, like you said, the House, it has its problems, but it's nowhere near the type of battle that we have to fight when it comes to the U.S. Senate.
Absolutely. And listen, and what we're thinking about doing is even starting the fight for 15 in like states, Virginia and New Hampshire, these senators. Listen, these states, especially states like Mississippi, these people desperately need a living wage. Desperately. They're the lowest paid in the country.
And if
you're absolutely right by grassroots. If we start with the grassroots, it could be an overswell where we can take over. That's how we did it in New York. That's how we did it in California. And that's how we did it. And that's how we did it in Florida. It started all with the grassroots.
And again, I think a lot
of you are still in Florida, though, right? Wait. You're still in Florida, right? You're not leaving Florida.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not leaving. No,
you're not moving on to greener pastures, are you?
It's not going anywhere. I'll tie you down. You're not going anywhere.
No. But what we need to do is those same people we ignited, these Amendment 2 new voters that we got to go to the back. We need to educate them and tell them about the power of voting, tell them the power about organizing and grassroots, and just keep them engaged. Now, we got them to go to the ballot by. We need to keep them engaged and keep them and viable and let them know what else what else. You were able to change how much you get paid by voting. You know how powerful that is?
Yeah.
Like, so do you? Get their first raise in September. They'll get their first. Everybody will be brought up to $10. That is huge.
Yeah. So when you have actions or you're doing stuff, is there a way that, and this might be something, I mean, I obviously had got involved in it from the progressive Dem side of it, but like if there are people that just want to be supportive and want to come out and show their support for labor and participate in any of these actions, is that something that is available, like that people can do?
Absolutely, that's the only way we're going to ever get it through. Because with the party, with the people who oppose the $15 minimum wage, they want you to believe it's just a black and brown problem, and just poor people who care. But in essence, it's everybody problem.
It
Because
is.
once we keep wages so low, that's how you get crime, and that's how you get everything, and you don't get true worth of people and what they can do. Because everyone have human resource, right? But we, as the people, collectively need to get the resource out of them. It's by paying them a living wage. So collectively, we always need people to come out. We don't.
So how do people find out? Like, where can people go and know when there's going to be an action?
They can always call me, and I always have it posted on my Facebook page. We have a Facebook Fight for 15 South Florida page.
And so is that current? Is the Florida Fight for 15 page current?
Yes, it's the Fight for 15 page is always current. We have a national page, and we got a state of Florida page, and we got a Twitter page.
We are actively updating our website right now, literally as we speak. The work actually just got started today. We are going to have a calendar page for various events, especially those that are involved on the ground down here. So anything related to Fight for 15, anything related to labor is going to be on that calendar.
Yeah, and we'll link. And that's the main thing, because we have our volunteer stuff and we do our own activities. But I also want to have links where people who just, want to go and be there for other organizations. And just so I think it's really important. And I always like to come out whenever I know that there's something and I can make it. I always like to show up for it. I think it's really important. So I want to encourage everybody to do that.
We had a warrior, and I know he's looking at us right down in heaven.
Mitch.
He would not miss not one Fight for 15
I know.
protest. So I just want to say, Mitchell.
We love him. We miss you, Mitch.
Love you.
We mentioned him before when we first came on, because I met you through Mitchell.
Yeah.
Mitchell was the person who invited me to the rally. And that was, he was fierce. That guy with his sign and his shirt and his megaphone in hand, he was just on it. And the progressive community took a really big hit down here with the loss of Mitchell. Just the progressive caucus, the Sunrise Movement has now changed hands 3 times. He was the hub for so many different organizations.
We could tell the story. It was, we were canvassing in the Miami-Dade portion of the district. This was, I think, at the beginning of the summer or the late spring. And I can remember driving past, because there was some type of protest event that was taking place at the, Jen, what's the name of that hotel again?
No, it was in Hallandale. It was at the Diplomat. It was at the Diplomat.
That's right. So we're driving back north, and we're driving past the Diplomat, and we knew that there was some event, I think, with either Trump or Pence that day. And there's one person standing on the picket line an hour before this thing is supposed to start. And of course,
it's a speaker in the red wagon.
And the hat. And he had the hat on.
And he's sitting there by himself on the curb, being there prepared for starting the thing. It was just, yeah. And
in a way, it is on us to carry that torch. The same for Jack Lieberman and, anybody else who's not here. The movement continues. And, I hate bringing it back, to Nina, but we love her. And she says, we're always in the struggle. It doesn't end. It's always, if you actually care about those who do not have much, then you're always going to be struggling, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to be willing to step on their throat in order to get ahead in life. And that's
absolutely.
It sucks that it's that way. That's the capitalist system that we currently have, but we're certainly working our tails off in order to make it better. It's going to take time, but I would like to think from your perspective that we are moving the needle in the right direction.
We are. We most certainly are. We're making it aware, and that's why this is a worker-led organization, so you can hear the story. When you hear a story of a mother of 2 that used the creamer of a coffee to give their baby milk, this should not be America. And she's a worker. I just remind you that she is a 40+ hour work at the second largest employer, and she have to use a creamer to give her baby formula. These are the stories we need to hear.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's always been that baseline, like what's the minimum standard of living we're willing to accept as a society. And to me, there is absolutely no excuse for anybody to work any job, 40 hours a week, a full-time job, and not be able to live with dignity. There is absolutely no excuse for that. And no, I don't think everybody should get paid the same. And I'm not a communist. And I think there's nothing wrong with the wealthy being wealthy. I have no problem with how wealthy the wealthy are. I'm concerned about the floor. Like what you were saying, it's not the ceiling, it's the floor. And so the idea that people have to work 2 and 3 jobs and that it's being purposefully done to them to avoid having to give them benefits and all of this nonsense that goes on is just basically to get around any sort of rules that we have just to screw our workers. And people think that capitalism can continue like that. We cannot have capitalism without consumers. That doesn't work. So it's the trickle up approach is what you were saying. I call it trickle up economics because those are the people that spend money. Wealthy people do not put their money in the system. That's just not how it works.
Nope.
And I do think that this state is ground zero for an economic populist uprising. We are a right to work state. We are a state that is driven predominantly by the hospitality and service industry. And we have, in many instances, the highest level of economic income inequality out of any state in the country.
Absolutely.
I think that there's enough people, but we really have to continue to build that infrastructure town to town, county to county. And again, if we make it a nonpartisan effort, it doesn't matter if it's a red county or a blue county. Most people are agreeable on the primary issues that we're fighting for.
Yeah, and that's why Amendment 2 won in all the red areas and all the blue areas, and that's why Amendment 2 won overwhelmingly 61% of the vote. It's not about partisan; it's about human dignity and human rights. You should be able to work one job and still have your basic needs met. I'm not asking for extra. They're not asking for extra. They just want basic needs met. And they work. And I have to remind you that they're hardworking Americans and they still can't get their basic needs met. There's something wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of disingenuousness, as you know, in politics, and you see it all the time. There are people that will join in the fight when it's politically convenient to do it, but there's also people that will join in the fight when no one's around. Knowing the people that are there, knowing the people that are really fighting, I think is what needs more highlighting than generally is, because if it's not a sexy topic, then very rarely are people, talking about it. I always thought that, when Jen ran for office, that she made a point to say this is really about, lifting labor as much as anything, because that's what's going to drive our future. One election doesn't make the difference, but building a foundation will. And I think we need to continue to create that movement county to county across the state. And if we do that, more and more people will want to be involved. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you think would be a good way for us to continue to expand the tent, if you will, as far as this movement goes?
Now, listen, what they say, the spark has been lit. If you look at all the new voters who have never voted before and they voted for Amendment 2 and they really poured out, and then you say we just have to keep them engaged. We have all the text messages and all the people we reached out and educate about Amendment 2 and they went out and vote. We just need to keep them engaged and keep them motivated and let them know change is coming if we stick together. And that's what we need. We know, like exactly what I said. Don't matter if that area is red, purple, blue, just go and let's talk about how do we improve lives of people. For if we've improved the bottom, it just only trickle up and it just grows for everyone. So everyone have a stake in this. When we raise wages, crime is lowered, life is better, and people can afford things. And it just can only help our economy and help everything around us.
I do think that there needs to be a discussion at some point as far as labor rank and file and unions versus union bosses, and whether or not the fight is being taken in a way that really needs to be taken. I do think in Florida, there is that fallback position of, well, we are a right to work state and people are only going to push as far as they feel that they're capable of doing before it goes too far, because we know a lot of people's, livelihoods are on the line. But I do think that more and more people need to be following what's going on in Bessemer. And if Amazon does pull this off, I do think it's going to have the Amazon workers, it's going to have a massive ripple effect. I think more and more people need to recognize the importance of joining a labor organization and what a difference that can make in terms of being able to get to that next level. Because as soon as we start to cross that line of, it's not about what party you're in, it's about which side you're fighting on. Are you fighting on the side of corporatism? Or are you fighting on the side of economic populism? That's when I think the dam is going to essentially break. And I think that's why the establishment fights so hard against every little thing, because if anything gets through, people are going to think, well, you know what? I think we can do that. I think we're going to be able to pull that off. And I think this is a very important topic, because do you find that, we had talked previously, before you came on the air, that a lot of the racial divisions are done along economic lines, and it's done on purpose.
Correct.
Because it's the easiest way to keep people distracted from what the real problem is. Have you observed any of that? Because I do think that people need to know, anyone on the front lines who sees that type of behavior, if it's really, if there's real substance to it, or if it's really just a tool of, corporate media and the establishment that's just trying to keep us divided for however much longer they can hang on. Did Linda's screen freeze?
Did she freeze? She might have frozen. I think she's on her phone because she was coming out from
That's all right. We'll give her a minute. But this has been great, and I got to tell you, this is it's everything really is about the movement going forward. With it's got to be a nonpartisan movement. That is how we will get to where we need to go. Because as I talk to anybody, they always say that I like this, I like that, I like this, I like that. As soon as it becomes Democrats, Republicans, that's it. I don't want anything to do with it, because that's when
she might have lost her stream. But that's okay. We've taken up enough of her time. If she calls back, we could let her back in. But
absolutely, we should.
She's always she's just somebody who's always on the right side of all of this. So
she is a very fighter. There was one other thing that I had in my head that slipped, and I forgot what it was. But I think we covered the majority of what we wanted to obviously get to.
But this actually did remind me that you're right. We need to link to that organization for actions and make sure that that's included on our calendar. Because it's important, and more people need to show up for that.
And this is why we put way too much stock on what's going on Capitol Hill. Not that it's not important, and not that we do not need that element to be part of the political process. We do, but our infrastructure at the ground level in most places is terrible. Like, it's non-existent. We do not have this type of infrastructure that we really need. And that's a big problem. And these little things that they do to divide us along the way without allowing us to stay focused on the task at hand is why we're not able to get where we want to go. And I do think that if we become a little bit more rigorous in our demands, as far as, not allowing these distractions, if you will, to get in the way of where we need to go. It's like the silly infighting with, different social media channels. Like, if people do not get their act together, we're never going to go anywhere. That's why we never talk about what other people are doing. We're not into the gossip of politics. We don't have time.
I'm not into the gossip of politics.
Well, neither am I, because we don't have time for this. We just don't.
I'm always amazed at the amount of people that do have time for it. Like, that's what's so fascinating about all of it. Like, all the people that act like they're so interested in doing things, but yet they have so much time on their hands to spend criticizing other people, like me. Mind your business, people.
Well, we now found out. Now we know why Linda, got knocked off the show. So apparently, our representative of this district doesn't think too highly of labor. So, she had to make a point to let us know, that she was doing that. But again, and Justin,
what are you talking about?
You're not even looking at the chat, are you?
I am right now. I'm back in there. But what happened?
Well,
I'm
Debbie,
in there right
apparently,
now. I don't. That's not Debbie.
well, you never know.
I know she's not watching our show. Then she's talking about her own investments into different industries. I don't think so. That's not Debbie.
Yeah. Oh, and the one thing I didn't get to talk to Linda about, which I thought was very important, was, we really, I do think emphasizing the importance of community garden cultivation going forward is a very big thing. And I think that'll be very helpful in a lot of communities, especially communities that struggle. And the ability to, self-sustainability is a big thing. And it's very hard to live off the grid when you're in an urban blighted area. But if you could learn how to grow your own fruits and vegetables and compost and whatnot, and it's not that complicated. And again, we have our team, if you will, that is more than willing to help. I think it's just a matter of having that land that can be used, and that'll be very, very helpful, because that'll take away from a lot of the pressures from having to, shop in the food deserts and things like that. There's a lot of different ways that we can grow a sustainable future, but I do think that we absolutely need to put emphasis on community gardens, and we need to build the team out. I think a lot of people would be interested in learning about that. And quite frankly, if you did own a piece of land and you wanted to make a little bit of money, there's no reason that you couldn't make some money off of a community garden. It doesn't have to be much, but if you're growing, think about it. Think about growing an avocado tree, for example, or a banana tree, for example. Think about the money that could be made that could either help the person who owns the property or the community at large, aside from what they're, buying. And let's be honest, that's as organic as it gets. You're not getting more organic food than something you're literally growing yourself in your own yard. If you're able to do that, you'll never have to shop at a supermarket. Maybe you go to a farmer's market once in a while to get items that maybe you can't necessarily grow. That's the difference. I mean, that's really what it's about. Knowledge is power, and that's one of the things that we have for the longest time had such a hard time, adjusting to. Jen, put Kira's message up on the chat, please. That I am so sick of politics always building walls, and that is the truth.
And it's, it's very juvenile and petty. That's the thing that's so ridiculous. It's not based on anything real. It's based on personal nonsense.
Correct. And one other thing that I will point out, there was another incident recently where a couple of people in the what I call the overwoke progressive movement decided that they don't like the fact that Jen is against vaccine passports. Jen is not going to stand on a soapbox screaming at you for being a fool for getting a vaccine or saying that you shouldn't get it. She's simply saying that, in my opinion, this is an infringement on your constitutional rights. And it's not just about the vaccine passport for international travel.
No, and I think that was a misunderstanding. People think I mean for travel. No, we've always had to get different vaccinations to go to different places.
You can't go to Europe, you can't go to Asia, you can't go to Africa.
No, that's always been the case. When we're talking about vaccine passports, we're talking about within use within this country to go to different events, to do different things. And yes, it does freak me out, because contrary to what the fear-based people are thinking, this is not smallpox. No. This is not something that we're going to, the fact that I've asked multiple people in the medical industry, so are we going to need to get like a coronavirus vaccine yearly, like a flu shot? Like, is this now going to be a new thing? And the answer is always the same. We don't know. And all I'm suggesting is that in the world of we don't know, that it's not a bad idea to use critical reasoning skills. And I would like to submit Occam's razor. And Occam's razor is a very clear way of looking at this. And this is not a conspiracy thing or anything like that. But what is the more likely scenario? That our government cares so deeply about our health and well-being, or that somebody's making a profit somewhere? Which of those scenarios is more likely? And I don't think it's just conspiracy theorizing to just postulate that maybe we should consider our civil liberties before we toss them out the door. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that this vaccine doesn't work. I'm not saying that people who are vulnerable shouldn't have the vaccine. I don't know. But until I have yet to have anybody in the medical field say anything other than we don't know regarding this vaccine.
And I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people that are going to wait. I'm obviously, going to be one of the last people that gets it just because of my age and my, the fact that I'm healthy and things like that. But I do think a lot of people are going to wait to get their vaccine because they want to see the effectiveness overall of how this, first run of it ultimately ends up, taking shape with people that have either had the virus or just trying to prevent themselves, to get the virus. That in itself, to me, is a very big part of this equation. And that is something that people really underestimate. They really rushed this vaccine out the door very quick.
Well, look, we talk about this all the time. We are a country that makes policy based on fear and profit. And those are not things that I believe are the basis of sound policy. Now, I am a person of reason and science, therefore I am not an anti-vaxxer, but I don't get a flu shot because I don't feel the need to get a flu shot, and it's not an issue for me. And so I need to know how this works in relation to that before I start injecting myself.
That is a very good point. And again, the thing that I would reference for most people, because there's been many instances throughout history, but the one that's the most recent that is something that I think most can relate to, is after 9/11, there was this idea that we have to fight the war on terror in a way that infringes on our civil liberties. And that means we have to give up the right to habeas corpus.
You keep calling it that. You do realize that it's just a matter of we lost our 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights, right?
Well,
like
again,
we lost 4, 5, and 6.
But there were a lot of people that were willing to give up their right to not have search and seizure.
Worse yet, the majority of people didn't even bother to read it.
No, and again, but they don't, because everything is out of fear. Like you said, this is a fear-based, and it is always easier. And it's always easy to fall into conspiratorial thought process because we do know our government works against us, because for them, we are just a commodity. We're a conveyor belt. We are here simply to serve the establishment. But people are starting to get the idea that maybe it doesn't have to be that way, but enough people have to set differences aside in order for that to happen. And people become very fickle, and they get very upset, and they get very, like I said, it's over woke culture. There's nothing wrong with believing in a cause, but you can't, if somebody doesn't share your same thought process, if you toss the baby out with the bathwater, you get what you deserve, because you're never going to convince everybody to see things exactly the way you do. I never attempt that. My closest friend growing up is the most hardcore conservative you could possibly imagine, but I can talk to him about primary issues and get him to see things in a clear way that a lot of others are not ever going to be able to do, because his viewpoints on a lot of issues are things that they can't agree upon. And for that reason, they will not engage. And if you do that, we're never going to get anywhere.
No, I think that people, first of all, are very, very dependent on mainstream media. Okay. So when you're dependent on mainstream media, you are automatically getting fear-based propaganda. You are automatically getting fear mongering. You are getting divisiveness. That is by design what is happening. So when I look at, and by the way, organizations or groups or like the CDC, that's not an unbiased source, people. Okay. There are many links between a lot of the organizations that are putting out this data that you're going with and Big Pharma. Okay. That is not conspiratorial. That's just a fact. So, when you look at that, we have a for-profit system in this country. I think that it is perfectly acceptable for us to use critical reasoning skills. That's all I'm suggesting. Critical reasoning skills. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not saying that, people shouldn't get it. I'm simply postulating that maybe we don't want to forego more of our civil liberties.
I know that there are people who are complaining in the chat, and they think that this is a little too libertarian for their liking, and I totally understand that. But one thing I will say is a couple of points. We agree with getting the vaccine. So I think that anyone who's trying to go down the road of suggesting that we're trying to diminish the potency, the propensity of what this is, that's not what we're saying.
No, and I'm not comparing this to the flu.
No,
all I've postulated is that if this is something that will have to be an annual thing, and my husband, by the way, who is a physician and knows about things like this, said a year ago that you wait until this now becomes the thing where you have to get an annual shot like you do with flu. And so I don't think that I'm being unreasonable for wanting more information, and I am not anti-vax. I've never gotten a flu shot. I've never felt compelled to get a flu. Somebody asked me why. Why would I? I've never felt compelled to get one. I don't get sick very often. Not all of us rely on pharmaceuticals for health and maintenance and well-being when we feel like a lot of these things are things that we can prohibit in ourselves by just how we maintain our lives. And that's just a different style of living, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And one thing for me, on a personal note, I exercise, I eat right, and I take multivitamins every day. And so my experience with the virus was very minimal. And I do think that, your health has a lot to do with that, as it would with anything. But
Yes.
one thing that Justin Steiner, who's in the chat, did say, where I'm going to have to correct you that you were wrong about, is that the vaccine was not created as a means for making profit. I can assure you that it is always, the profit is always in mind.
Always
in mind when this is done. I want to say it's Pfizer, I'm pretty sure, got a $4 billion contract from the federal government. Now, it may not be, or a subsidy. Got a $4 billion subsidy from the federal government. So we are, as long as we have a for-profit healthcare system, we are always going to see this in the lens of, yes, we want to help people, but we have to make money in the process. And so because we do not have a universal healthcare system, over 200,000 people have died as a result of this virus that would not have died if we had a universal healthcare system from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So when you consider how many
and now we're running around playing Monday morning quarterback and shooting vaccines into people that we have no idea if they're going to keep needing them. And, quite honestly, then what? Then in 23, there's a new coronavirus, 23, COVID 23. And then we have to get it. And I mean, where does it end? Like, where does this end? And then quite
no one
honestly,
is suggesting, I'm making this as crystal clear as I can. Everyone should get vaccinated. This is not a question of whether you should or you should not. There is no conspiracy here. But there is a line to how much you want the government to be involved after you get your vaccine.
Well, you're saying that. I have no intent. Like right now, I'm not intending on getting vaccinated.
Okay.
So I just think it's a personal choice. I think that that's fine. If people want to go do that, that's fine. That's not something I'm choosing to do.
All right.
That's just the way it is. So I don't think everybody should get vaccinated. I think if you're vulnerable and you are somebody that is at a, higher susceptibility to having severe symptoms and severe problems, and you think that, like my dad gets a flu shot, but he has asthma. So like there's people that have issues. That's fine.
Once herd immunity has been established, then again, if you get the vaccine, then that should be enough. Again, we're talking a pre versus post vaccine type situation. If you have a vaccine, or if you're able to get one, then you're in a situation where it's not really relevant whether a person has gotten theirs or hasn't gotten theirs. There are people who will go out of their way not to get it. And that's part of the problem. There is the denial component to what was going on previously. People not taking, the proper precautions necessary. And so that to me is a big thing. Now, I'll get the vaccine because I think it's the right thing to do, and also because I would like to travel. And so those are things that I have to consider. And if places require it, then they require it. If you choose not to get it, that's on you. And again, we can agree to disagree, but that doesn't make you a bad person. Unfortunately,
no,
because of the pressure that is mounted from doing this type of thing, everyone thinks that, you all have to fall in line and just do what everybody else does. And that's the danger. We don't know for sure. As much as we think we know how effective this is going to be, we don't know. It's way too early.
I look at everything and I look at this the same way. This is Darwinism. I also don't have the same thoughts of death that a lot of people do. I don't see death as inherently bad. I just see it as it is. Yes, it's sad when people lose loved ones, but death in and of itself, it just is. It is what it is. And none of us is getting out of here alive. I think that we are these are things that just, if we had just done social distancing, had healthcare, and wore masks from the beginning, this would have worked its way through our population. And yes, people die from illness. That happens. That's what, it's evolution that's happening. And I think what's interesting is in 100 years, people can look back and they're going to decide were the people that took the vaccine on the proper side of evolution or were the people that didn't. And we don't know. Maybe the vaccine is this, the thing that will make people survive. Maybe it isn't. I don't know.
And again,
That's
I
the
don't
thing.
know what percentage of the population needs to get it, but again, this is the thing about the thing about the vaccine passports, where it's a very, very slippery slope. It just is, because it adds to the element of the police state, which is something that has just been ramping up. And again, a lot of people don't necessarily see it. A lot of times you miss, what's ultimately happening because it's not moving fast enough. A lot of times you miss it when you've essentially been consumed by this idea that you can make your own decisions. A good example of that is when it comes to our social media channel and other channels that are getting horrifically suppressed by big tech censorship. That's a really big problem. And we have no ways of recourse to say otherwise. So the more control the government ultimately ends up having, the less of our civil liberties and rights we actually have. So that's why it's not a question of not getting the vaccine. Most, if not all, should get it. It's really just a very big part of the process. Knowing that people are going to get better, and maybe people are not going to get better. There may be people who get the vaccine and doesn't respond to them correctly. Like I said, this is a new thing, and it's only been going on for a handful of months, and we definitely need to get to herd immunity on this virus. But
Here's the thing. I don't feel like that's like, we don't know enough about this. That's all there is to it. And you want to start injecting people and waiting and see, go ahead and have at it. That's fine.
No,
I don't think
a lot of people,
and I don't think that you're right in just saying it's the right thing to do. No, it is not necessarily the right thing to do. It's a thing to do, and a lot of people are choosing to do it. But it's not a judgment issue. And the fact that you're saying it's like as if it's right or wrong, that's not necessarily the case.
Yes, and
so
again,
I'm just,
listen. I agree with you that you can't make it mandatory, because if you make it mandatory, you're gonna have a civil war.
Yes, Jorfair 88. We didn't say that with polio because the polio vaccine created sterility immunity, which meant that nobody could transmit it to other people. We still don't know enough about this vaccine, so it is a little bit different. And polio isn't something that happens on a yearly basis. There isn't a new polio on a regular basis. There have been a myriad of coronaviruses, and they're going to probably get stronger. And yes, we do create all sorts of bio stuff in labs, and things are happening like that. And we are creating stronger and stronger viruses, and we are being less and less healthy. So I just, I do not compare this to polio. It does not create sterilized immunity as far as we know. Apparently the Johnson & Johnson one has like a 6-month rate of protection or whatever that is. And so, no, it is not the same as polio. It is not the same as smallpox. And I think that we are acting out of fear. And I don't like, that's just not how I choose to live, and how I choose to make policy is not fear-based and or profit-based. When I see evidence to the contrary, then I will believe to the contrary.
I don't disagree. And again, I think that you have to be able to have discourse about these types of topics that not everybody is going to necessarily agree with, and that's okay.
Also, wait a minute. I would like to point out that Jonas Salk, when he created the vaccine for polio, he gave it away. He gave it away. He didn't make any money off of it. Okay, so there was no profit motive whatsoever in that.
And the inspiration for the polio vaccine was FDR. That's where the push to really get it done was from there. What I would say, though, is that it's still too early to know just how effective this is going to be.
Exactly.
You hope it's going to work, and you hope that it's effective.
And I think it very well could be effective for COVID-19. But will it be effective for COVID-22 or COVID-23? And that's the thing. And
and what you guys need to understand, and this is why there always has to be a degree of skepticism. It's very important. Even if you're not paying out of pocket in order to get the vaccine, they are still getting massive government subsidies for this vaccine. Massive, in the billions. Nothing is done for the sake of humanity with the way our healthcare system is established in this country. If we're ever going to change, people need to recognize that this is a nonpartisan issue, because it is. We do not need for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. If we didn't have that, hundreds of thousands of people would be alive today.
Yeah, Justin, yeah, they tried to make it free to people, but that doesn't mean that somebody's not profiting off of it. And not only that, but what they're doing is they're using every other opportunity with the COVID panic and all of this. For example, Peter had a test and tested positive, but then you have the option of paying money for the more expensive test that doesn't have as many false positives. And so it's just, this is going to be.
I was asymptomatic and I tested positive, and then I thought, well, maybe I should take another test. And apparently there's another test
that isn't free.
That isn't free.
Yes.
But that is a problem, and Blue Bandit, who's a friend of the show, brings up a very good point that what you have to consider is that the virus is mutating and becoming more potent. And that's where the argument for the vaccine becomes stronger, which is you don't want it to turn into something that people are going to have an even more difficult time being able to get past. And then ultimately, is the current vaccine in place not going to be strong enough to deal with these mutations that will come with it? So, and again, I don't think you're wrong. I think that we're also in a very tricky spot where we are constantly playing catch up because we're in a situation where we have a for-profit system. We were not ready to properly deal with this thing from the very beginning. We always thought that was the case. We should have had universal health care, and we should have had some form of an emergency UBI where people who could stay home would be able to without putting themselves at risk.
Well, there's that. And that if we didn't have a for-profit healthcare system, we would just probably have overall better health and constitution anyway. We are so filled with vulnerable, sick populations. That's another issue. If we weren't having so many populations of people with such poor constitution and poor health outcomes, it would have a lower death rate. So, it's all part of it. If we took better care of ourselves in general, we wouldn't have the same death rate that we're having from this. There's a lot of different things. And we also don't care about the collective in this country. And I say it all the time, but it's true. If we cared about the collective, we would have just started social distancing and wearing masks and just being respectful in the first place. But no, we can't do that because people had to spend an inordinate amount of time fighting against mask wearing when ironically, that's the only thing that was based on science at that point. So, it's like the one thing that we knew for sure actually works is wearing masks. And that's the thing that people were fighting about doing.
Well, like I said,
about their rights.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're not going to agree on everything. And this is an issue that I think you're off base in a couple of spots. And look, there are people in the chat who think you're very insensitive about saying that people just die. Look, you know what? A lot of people feel that way, but a lot of people think that that's very inappropriate. And, I don't disagree. I think that you have to take into consideration that a lot of people are afraid and a lot of people do value life differently than you do. So
I said that in the very, very beginning. I said, I think of death very differently than a lot of people. I don't think of it as good or bad. It just is. And that is just how I believe. It's not something that I put a judgment on. Nobody ever wants it to happen to somebody they love. And yes, it's sad for people when they lose someone they love. But no, I don't inherently find death to be bad. And that bothers people. That's unfortunate. I am not, that's just how I feel. It is what it is.
No, and I get it. And again, like I said, this is an issue that not everybody is going to agree upon.
And here, if I just died, I would just die. I would be dead. Then it wouldn't. Look, I don't support people having pain and suffering. I think it's horrible when parents outlive their children. There are certain things that are very, very tragic in the way of people dying. But do I think death is inherently bad? No, I don't. And I have lost loved ones, and I still think that way. I just think it's part of life. I think it's just the nature of the circle of the universe. And that's just how I think of it. And so it's unfortunate that people see that as insensitive. It's just how I think of life and death.
Yeah. And Michael, the other thing you have to remember, Michael Pesarini in particular is very, unhappy with your takes. And so I do think that regardless of whether, you agree with Jen's assessment or not, I still think it's going to be a very long time before we even get a shred of normalcy back in terms of living. I think who just said it? Choosy heretics. That's funny. 10,000 people are not cramming into an arena anytime soon. That is not happening. You know, the thing about like sports, for example, which is a big part of my life, that's not going to return anytime soon. Open air sports, not really crowded. Yeah, that'll return, and it sort of has already. But in terms of, you know, heavily congregated in closed spaces, that's not happening, you know?
I actually have been somewhat thankful in terms of like the few times that I have traveled, because I feel like planes and the airlines probably never really cleaned their planes before, and now they're sort of being forced to actually clean them. And I always thought of flying as like flying in a petri dish anyway. Like I always, whenever I'd be on a plane, I would always like want to just be like not touching anything. Like I've always thought of it as just so icky in terms of germs and stuff, and you're in that capsule. So this is actually creating them to be a little bit more diligent about cleaning, if anything.
Yeah, and again, you know, it's more of a fatalistic way of looking at life, but, you know, everyone has their own assessment as far as what's the proper way to look at it. You know, and herein lies the problem. As Michael just pointed out, Texas just lifted all of their COVID mandates, and that's going to cause a lot of unnecessary death. And that's a problem. And
masks is the only thing that was totally based on actual reason that was put into place. So, you know, that's the biggest issue, is that, like I said, we're not making policy decisions based on reason and science. We're making them based on fear and profit. And that's just not the best way to go about this.
I think the other concern that people have to have as far as the vaccine is concerned is whether or not it's going to have different types of side effects long term. Those are things that a lot of people are concerned about. It's like different pharmaceutical drugs that you take. You solve one problem, you have another 1, 2, or 3 problems spring up. So again, and again, Jofer is right. Social distancing worked. Being outside worked. Yes. Wearing a mask worked.
And we reduced all the flu epidemic. You know, like we've had much less of everything else. So clearly that does work.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that do work. You just have to be willing to understand that there is going to be a lot of skepticism from a lot of different people. And look, Jen is speaking for the voice of a lot of people who feel this way and are just not going to say it publicly.
No, and here's the thing is that when people say, what about the people surrounding me? I'm not surrounded by anybody else that's quarantining. So that's the other thing. I have a husband who goes in and out and goes into places all the time. And even before the vaccine, my kids go in and out.
An essential worker. An essential
worker.
Yes.
And so it's like, I can't live quarantine. So I am living where I'm constantly exposed. So it isn't about me exposing the people around me. It's the people around me exposing me and more than anything. And no, I'd be very respectful of people and that are, you know, in a position where they, where you would wear a mask. I'm very respectful of that. I totally care. I'm not subjecting anybody to anything more than the people around me are subjecting themselves. Like I'm not around anybody really that isn't in the same position. So I don't know what that is referring. Like I'm somehow bringing COVID into my house full of quarantining family and subjecting them to it. It's just not like that.
No, and Moon, I can attest for, you know, Jen, you know, does not really, you know, go out other than to, you know, outside events, you know, that we do for volunteering.
I don't do much. That's the reality. You know, I don't. I've been very respectful of social distancing. I've been very respectful of social distancing and very respectful of wearing masks. And I'm just, for the most part, keeping to myself with the occasional outdoor thing. So, you know, I feel like I'm doing my part in, you know, trying to maintain everything. Like there's nothing really I'm going to do more at this point. And I don't think that's inconsiderate. I think it's very considerate.
I think we need to just learn more about the effectiveness of what is actually going on. I know a lot of people want to get back to normal, and maybe we hopefully will in the very near future. But I also think we need to have somewhat of a wait and see process to make sure that the effectiveness of the vaccine is actually taking shape. Because remember, you know, we're not in what is considered the vulnerable crowd, but I think close to 100 million people have been vaccinated by now, or something close to that. So that gives you a good idea of, you know, what to expect. You know, we'll definitely
see. Look, like I said, we will see how this starts to work or doesn't. And, you know, I had some very valid questions that medical people can't answer for me, which is, let's say there is a 6-month efficacy on that, and then you do need to get revaccinated. Well, Then does it matter if somebody is 5 months in versus 1 month in? And then are they less efficacious so that we all have to get it at the same time? Does it have to be timed? Does everyone have to get their shots in January or whatever? Like, how are we going to regulate that? And if it's something that has to happen more than once, how do you do that? And by the way, they're having an inordinate amount of trouble getting a lot of people to come back for the second dose. A lot of people are going for their first dose and then they're not liking the side effects and they're not coming back for their second. So, I mean, I'm just saying.
That's not something I'm aware of, but you know, I don't.
I found that out when we went out to dinner with our friends, and my friend who is, it was an ER doc, and now he actually works for an insurance company and he's administrative, but he's aware of all of these issues in dispensing the vaccine.
We definitely we got to get Wendell Potter to come on the podcast. We got to talk to him. You know, John, if you're watching, we definitely need to get Wendell on, because for somebody who worked in, you know, was high up in the pharmaceutical industry, what is very important is understanding the mindset of where the for-profit system goes and whether or not how things would have medically been different had we had a universal system from the very beginning, and where that would have placed Big Pharma as far as getting the vaccine put together. And we know that there's distribution problems all over the country, all over the world. You know, we're actually doing somewhat better than most, but of course at the state level, we all know how bad it can be. We know that our governor here in Florida sells vaccines to the highest bidder. So it's like I said, it's a messed up situation. And, you know, I've lost people, you know, to the virus. I am yes, one of those.
But here's what I would say. If all of these people that are so enwrapped with the whole everything about this and making sure in the vaccines and if we had that much enthusiasm and that much participation and that many people giving a crap about Medicare for all, we'd be golden. That's what, if we had the amount of enthusiasm of people lining up for vaccines and those people actually cared about real health care for everybody, we would be in an infinitely better place than we are. That's what I think.
Yeah, and again, we're also dealing with a situation where the sense of urgency and fear for Medicare for all is not, you know, what it should be. If it was like, you know, the COVID vaccine, then yes, we would have universal health care because people would be demanding it, and people would understand that nothing would have saved more lives in this pandemic than if we had a universal system. That's a fact. We would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives alone. And there's no really telling, there's no way of quantifying just how many lives actually would have been saved, because remember, that's a low end number. If everyone was capable of getting tested without fear of having a major financial hit, if there was this immediate desire to listen to, you know, the CDC guidelines from the jump, and you didn't have to worry because we would have had a universal basic income in place, so people didn't have to put themselves in harm's way, and that only the essential workers would have had to go out and would have worked obviously in much safer conditions. You know, you never know how much different this would have turned out. So that, in a way, I think.
But you know, I think that it's okay to be questioning. That's all.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything, and I think everyone in the chat who disagrees with Jen's sentiment, remember this: you always have to question more. You know, some people don't like your laissez-faire attitude about death, and that's fine. A lot of people are not.
They don't have to. I'm not asking for agreement, and honestly, I don't really care. I am doing what I'm doing to try to help as many people as possible. My personal opinions about whatever there are, if people want to get their panties in a bunch about that, then have at it. I have things to do. I'm so sick of having to defend my positions on anything, quite honestly. It makes people like me who actually give a damn not ever want to be in politics and not ever want to represent people, because we spend more of our time dealing with this kind of crap and hate than we can even spend trying to help anybody. That's what I think. So I don't really care what anybody's thoughts are about me.
Justin, one of the things to remember is if you say we shouldn't make decisions based on fear and profit, but in sound science, which we do, the evidence of where the vaccine isn't as effective as they claim, no one said that the vaccine is not effective. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is this is still very early on in the process, and we don't know how long it's going to be effective. You know, there's always the possibility that there could be another wave that ends up coming up with people that got the vaccine. It's way too early on to determine where this is going to go. A lot of people want to just go right back to normal. And I understand that because we've been under quarantine for a long time. And yes, there are things that you can do, and you could do it in a safe manner. But in terms of real normalcy, going back to the way things were, that is not something that is happening anytime soon. And if it does happen anytime soon, it's not a good move. Because like I said, even if the vaccine works, there is no guarantee as to how effective it's going to be short-term and long-term, and whether it takes to everyone who gets it. That's what I'm saying, and I think that that's what Jen is saying. You know, what you have to remember is that, and again, Michael Passerini, very good point. Jen, how to do a lockdown. You see that? You see what he said right there? Can you put that up?
What? Which? Where? Oh, yeah, that they didn't do a lockdown?
So this is how you do a lockdown.
And I would point out that we had been pushing for that since day one. So I get that. And I'd be willing to lock down, and I would be willing to do that. And I would be I would be willing to be part of a collective where we all lock down and do that. I have no problem with that. I would have done that. I never complained about about a quarantine or about a mask, but I'm not willing to just go get in line for a vaccine right now that I just am not getting enough information about. And I don't think that makes me selfish. And I don't think that that makes me some sort of like COVID vector.
No, but you do come off as insensitive in some respects, and you have to recognize where other people are coming from. You have a different viewpoint on this. You do not see things out of fear, but a lot of people do see things out of fear because a lot of people have lost loved ones to this virus. So we cannot be insensitive to the way other people are thinking. You have to meet them where they are.
You know what? And I think that there's either reason or there's not reason.
No, but there is reason. I'm just saying that there's a way of explaining it in a way that makes it so that people like Michael, like Justin, and others who are in the chat may not be fully grasping what you're pointing out. You're not entirely off base with what you're saying.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
I said, gee, thank you for that. I needed your confirmation that I'm not.
Well, again, this is, like I said, it's still a sensitive topic that a lot of people need to understand. There is no like actual end game yet in terms of where this is going to go. Getting vaccinated, I think it's a great idea. I wouldn't force anybody to go and get one. There is no point in doing that. And if you try to force vaccines on people, I can assure you it is going to get ugly, very ugly. All you can do is continue to encourage people to do this and show the long-term, short-term and long-term benefits of doing such a thing. And yes, we want to get back to some degree of normalcy, but we also need to learn from this experience as far as what we do need in society. We do need a universal healthcare system.
Yeah.
Medicare for all is the best way forward. We need a living wage, and we need to have some form of a social safety net, and perhaps universal basic income is that answer. And if we don't have these things, who knows what the next pandemic is going to be like? And I know people say, well, you know, this is the first one in a century. But with the way things are right now, how many more people are living on this planet that were living on this planet back in 1920? You have to consider those things as well. You know, we are now, are we overpopulated in terms of land mass? No, but we're overpopulated in terms of where most people live. And that is a problem. And Broward County is a great example of that. And Florida is a great example of that because it hasn't been handled very well. In the long term, who knows? We advise everyone to be as cautious as possible. But with that said, don't just take anything the government tells you without a grain of salt. You have to, because there's a lot of money involved. Like I said, as far as the vaccine is concerned with Pfizer, as far as I know, they have a $4 billion subsidy from the government. That's a lot of motivation to put something out there that hopefully works, but you don't know where it may ultimately go long term. And that is, in essence,
well, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But to be honest with you, it's not my job to like hold people's hands and soothe them and make them feel better. I am not Maudlin. I am not that's just not me. That's just not me. But my purpose is to provide a platform for ideas and issues and to push things forward that help the collective. My personal opinions and whether or not I'm touchy-feely enough for people, I am so over that. And this is exactly one of the reasons why when people say, are you going to run again? Do you want to run again? I'm going to say, look, I'd love to represent people. I'd love to fight for the things that people want. But I'm so sick and tired of dealing with all the nitpicky things about how I said this and how I wasn't sensitive and how I was, you know what? That's not my job. And so it's like, if people want an advocate, then you get an advocate. Stop nitpicking, whether it's AOC. It's like everybody. It's just like, you know what? If everybody spent as much time working for the common good as they do bitching about how other people are working for the common good, we would have more common good. That's what I'm done. And I am just sick of it. I'm not walking on eggshells. This is why I don't want to be a candidate like that. Because I don't care what I'm allowed to think, however, whatever I think about stuff like that. It's not my job to hold people's hands and get them through a tough experience. That's what their family and friends are for. That's not my job.
No, and that's okay. And again, like I said, I'm, even though I have a different, viewpoint, I do think that there are certain things that it's a hot button issue, and hot button issues, when you have people who are supposedly on your side, do not agree with you, it becomes a sticking point. And this is why we can't have nice things, because even if you agree on 99 other things, the one thing sticks out like a sore thumb, and they find reason not to, go along to get along.
And then they sit there and they screenshot like every little thing you say.
Stop. So
I'm just saying in general, the cattiness and the infighting and the nonsense that we get from every little thing we do makes the people that want to help not want to help. And that's why we're stuck where we're stuck.
That's fair. And again, like I said, we have to be a little bit more reasonable and logical with the way we go about certain things going forward. We're in a tough spot. We are, because we don't know where things are going, and we don't know, like I said, how effective this is going to be. But recognizing people's fears and concerns is also important, because we're not trying to hurt anybody. We are not trying to tell people that what they're doing is wrong, or that the direction they ultimately end up taking is right.
I'm trying to fight for your civil liberties. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that no matter what happens, and whatever the people that do get wrapped up or are vulnerable or fearful, whatever it is, that while they're not looking, their civil liberties aren't being taken away. That's all I'm trying to do. And just make sure that this is handled in a way that is in accordance with our Constitution. That's all.
And again,
here it is. See, I take this very seriously.
That's probably why a lot of people on all sides of politics seem to think you're good. You're good people. So that is a good thing. But like I said, we are very, we are very fear-based right now, and we're hopefully going to be able to dial it back soon enough. So with that said, what do we have coming up on Thursday? Let everybody know.
That's exciting, right? See, like if I were really more organized graphically, I would be able to put up that graphic, but that would take me like there's some downloading and JPEGs involved. But no, we are having Patrick Cody. Does he say it Cody or Coat?
Cody, I think.
Cody. Okay, and Savage Joy are going to be on with talking about their book, the Yas Queen Chronicles.
You guys definitely want to read that.
Yeah, it's like political parody. It's really funny. It's like written like a graphic novel. It looks really good. So we're having them on. And then tomorrow, just in case anybody is interested, we are having our first ever Trash and Taco Tuesday. We will be doing a beach cleanup tomorrow at 3:30. We're meeting in Hollywood Beach at the end of Connecticut Street at the Park Pavilion. We're going to do a 90-minute beach cleanup, and then we're going to have tacos because it's Tuesday, and we should always have tacos on Tuesday. So that's coming up.
And where are you guys going to get the tacos from?
Okay, so here's the thing. I keep getting the two places confused. So we're going to do one, and then to spread the love, the next time I'll do the other. But we're going to start at Connecticut and work our way south. And we'll end up at the one that's on the south side, south of Margaritaville. And I think that one is called Taco Spot, or is that Taco Joint? Like there's one, they're both good. So we'll spread the love, different weeks, different.
The one where you can kind of stand outside, I think, is Taco Joint, I think.
Yeah, the one that's the further south one. And so that's where I think we're going to end up. It just makes sense that we'll go in that direction. There's no need to walk north because then there's no tacos. There's nothing north until you hit the pier and there's no tacos. So we're going to go south in search of tacos. And then I might also engage in, frosty beverage. We'll see. But we're hoping it's good. I have buckets. I have gloves. I have a few garbage pickers for the older people, such as myself. And I think it's going to be good. Our new volunteer coordinator is going to be there to introduce herself, meet people, hopefully get new people signed into the system. We're getting a new web page. So things are happening. It's happening.
Jen, from a distance. And with that said, Jen, post the last message that was just put up there by Justin.
Well, we're glad you came too. Where did you come across us? Because I love when I meet people that come across us in.
Justin apparently responded to. He said it was happenstance on Facebook that he stumbled on one of the links that was posted about the live stream, but he, for whatever reason, much appreciated, Justin, decided to switch over to YouTube, which is exactly where we want everybody watching.
Thank you. Yes. So please subscribe. And you know, do you remember when we were at the Fat Art Village Art Walk and I got recognized by somebody who saw me on Tim Pool's show? And, you know, it's always good when that happens, because I feel like we made a good strategic decision to go, because when you get new people and reach a different audience, and it just proves the point that that's an effective way of building a coalition, because this guy who came up to us probably doesn't agree with us on a lot of things, you know, is probably, you know, a little bit to the right of us, whatever. And yet he really appreciated what we were doing. And he wouldn't have otherwise ever seen us if I don't cross those lines and go onto different platforms. So I think it's really important. And I think that when new people come on, it's important to spread the word. Justin, we're all about just like education here. I mean, we'll talk about pretty much anything.
And last thing I want to mention in the chat is Michael Passerini is also new to the show, and that's great. We're very happy to have him here. And he says that the chat is depressing, not what you said, Jen, necessarily. You have to understand, the thing that makes Jen appealing is that she is able to communicate with people across all different ideological spectrums, from people who are as to the left as it gets to people who are to the right as it gets.
Yeah.
And having this type of conversation, or these conversations, are very important, because a lot of people are going to see things differently. You have to remember that you're not going to agree on a lot of issues that, oh, you're not new. And I apologize, Michael, and thank you very much for supporting the campaign.
You could consider being a Patreon. I just want to very quickly say that, just in case people don't know, that Generational Change podcast, any money that comes into Generational Change actually goes into our GenCore organization, which is our nonprofit volunteer service organization. So right now, that is the only thing that we're using money for, is service. Yep. So I just want people to be aware of that.
Yeah. And again, we, for anything that is going to help build this movement in South Florida is what we're all about. I'm a small business owner. Jen is an attorney. For us, we're doing this because we care and because we really want to make people's lives better. Our intention is not to be for shock value. Our intention is not to, get a high-paying gig online. It just goes to show you that you can really have a much more enjoyable experience talking about politics when it isn't based on, when it isn't necessarily based on ideological, political lines, because that's what we're trying to avoid.
Look how funny. This is how I know it's not. I really think, is it Declan or who is it? I don't know. We're going to probably always guess.
It's got to be Declan.
And I want to answer Kira. My goal, Kira, is to do it the first Tuesday of the month. The first Tuesday of every month, have Trash and Taco Tuesday.
So if you know in advance.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the first time we're doing it, but assuming that it goes well, which I honestly, even if it's just me and Chloe and Jordana, we're going to still clean the beach and eat tacos, so it'll go well.
Now, Kira, it's very important that, time-wise, it's always going to be flexible, but tomorrow we do have our intern, Chloe, who's going to be coming, and she's going to be shooting some B-roll footage of Jen. So that's important. And other than that, after that,
she's got class. So,
Debbie, I don't think we're ever going to invite you on our show.
Debbie, what's so fun? And here's how you know it's not really her. This is how, because Debbie would never acknowledge my existence, and by being here, that acknowledges my existence. So that's how we know it's never her. And I also feel the same way about Jimmy Dore too.
And the thing is that when Debbie has acknowledged Jen's existence, it was always my opponent. That's how you were referred to. Your opponent. Yeah, that's who you are.
But barely ever even mentioned at all, even like that. That's really funny. You think it's Declan?
And you know what? And the final message of tonight before we go off, Michael Passerini just had a great message, which is I would donate to Jen if she ran again. You said what you believe, and I said what I believe. And that
this is what I'm talking about. That is called meaningful discourse. That's what it means, because it doesn't make sense.
Did you hear what I said? Could you please put it up?
Wait, which one? Here.
On that note, that is the essence of political growth in every way possible. Because even though it's a hot button issue and you're not necessarily going to agree, and there can be fierce disagreements about, how you see this and how you don't see it, the reality is that is real growth, because for far too long we are finding people who find an issue that they disagree on, even one that's very hot button. It's somewhat similar.
But it shouldn't cause to cancel someone. So like, let's say someone doesn't agree with me about this, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean that they'd be better off supporting Debbie Wasserman Schultz because they don't like what I said about this?
And that is the difference between somebody like Michael and somebody else who can't see the forest through the trees. Even if they don't agree with you, they know that you are not somebody who is ever going to actively work against them. Whereas somebody like Debbie actively works against people, actively. And that's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I think that regardless, and the problems that we've always had with people are when it's like nitpicky little, like it's things where they're trying to find a problem and they're not looking at what's really in the best interest of the collective. And I think that's a real problem.
And that is why it is on us to continue to build a nonpartisan labor.
Agreed, Michael, agreed.
Yeah. A nonpartisan labor movement is how we're going to get this. We're going to really turn this into something big.
Yeah. And it's like, I think that people know that. If you've been watching me for any amount of time, you know that I'm about service and I'm about building coalitions and lifting up the least among us. That is my whole purpose. I have no ulterior motive whatsoever. So I get that people don't always like my demeanor. I get that, but I'm not going to be something I'm not. I'm just not. It's not how this works, So it is what it is.
Well, we are evolving on what is known as generational change. And so on that note, you guys have been great. We are definitely growing this channel now. Jen is going to be doing a very, very special crossover podcast at the end of the month. We are not going to say yet who it's going to be, but
I don't even know who it's going to be.
Well, I can assure you that if you thought that the Vosh crossover was big,
I know who it is. Yeah,
this is going to be 2 or 3 times bigger.
That's
our
awesome.
intention for our show, in order for us to be able to do a lot of the things that we'd like to do, especially when it comes to different levels of monetization and, of course, being able to sell merch, we need to get to 10,000 subscribers. We are just over.
Yeah, and we do have, I don't know if our issues probably aren't up on the page anymore, but they're coming back on the new page. When we gave up Gen 2020, we switched it over, and right now it's just a very basic web page, but we are putting our issues back up. So my information, like all of my things, will be up.
There's a new website.
Yeah, I'm not covering anything. We're tech challenged and financially challenged. So
yes, but I do think that if we are able to get to 10,000 subscribers, that will definitely help a lot. And I think with the guests that Jen is going to be doing a crossover with, there is a very good chance that that's going to do it in one shot. So
well, that's cool.
Oh yeah. Well, we're talking like probably at least 1 million followers altogether. So
very exciting stuff. And also, like at some point, we're going to put out the teaser about my birthday next month and what we're going to be doing for that.
We are going to do.
You don't say what we're doing yet. Don't say that because I have to confirm.
No, but we're definitely going to do another telethon at some point. We're not 1,000% sure which way we're going to go, but it's pretty much down to 2 possibilities as far as what we're going to do.
But that's not what I'm talking about for my birthday.
No, that's fine. You don't have to.
We're doing a Jen's 50th Bash live stream cocktail party fundraiser, and I'm not exactly sure what we're doing it for yet. Like I'm still working that out, but it's for Gen Core, but what the specific ask is going to be, like I'm still working it out. But yeah, I am nothing if not willing to use my birthday as an opportunity to raise money.
Well, if it's for a good cause, then I think everybody should join in. So with that said, a pleasure as always. Do not subscribe to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's podcast. It's probably even worse than
Debbie Racial Change. I know it's Declan.
Yeah, it's got to be Declan. But hey,
I've never seen
better to give us real cannon fodder with Debbie than it would be with Jimmy. You know, Jimmy's got a lot to learn about how to build relationships. That's definitely his weakest point right now.
And if anybody's wondering why we're mentioning them together, is because we have one of our watchers, subscribers that pretends to be Jimmy Dore, and I also think he pretends to be Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And I am going to say that notice how we never see him in the chat at the same time. I'm just saying.
Hey, you know that's
Superman.
That's very true. And you know, I'm not doing any voices tonight. I'm going to save all of them for Thursday because I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you all right now.
We have a big night Thursday.
Want to tune in on Thursday night.
It's going to be very entertaining.
We are definitely going to talk about AOC. We're going to address it. It's got to be talked about. And it will be talked about in a reasonable way. In reason. Not this.
Not going to sit there and curse her out and call her out.
No, it's not the answer. So we'll talk about that. And of course, we are going to have on Savage Joy and Pat the Burner. And we're going to be talking about the book that they wrote together. Woo-hoo! We're going to have a nice big shindig. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really incredible.
You're still going to be there, though, right? Really, when are you coming back?
It's going to be really incredible, really tremendous.
No voices. When are you coming back? Because there's no one here to make me dinner. There's no one here to make me dinner.
You learn how to cook for yourself. I make people cook for me all the time. It's really good.
I like when you're here, you cook dinner for me.
Well, I'm not cooking for you tonight, and I would cook you some nice soup and maybe a bagel, you know, those things. And I have to, Jen, I have to tell you, being up here in New Jersey, I finally had the opportunity to have a bagel that actually is good.
It's really good, right?
Really, really good. Really, really good.
When are you coming back?
I will be back for Monday night's show.
Okay.
I am actually arriving at 7:15 on Monday.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable that that's what you're doing. You love to do that. Why do you do that every time?
It's fun.
Oh my God. It's not fun for me.
All right, guys.
We're out.
Good night.
Bye all.
See you soon.